On an economic basis only, what's been the best Virgin business that you've ever created?
The Virgin brand. I think even if we sell a company, the Virgin brand continues, forever with as part of that company. So it has grown into, the biggest part and the most important part, and it is our reputation. It's everything. But I think, what people, I remember when we started 50 years ago in business, and we moved from, student magazines into record companies into airlines. People, the press said that this man is mad. He's going to stretch his brand too far. He'll go bankrupt. But 50 years on, if I hadn't done that, the record shops have disappeared. Right. Things move on, so we try to move on with the times and create a way of life.
If the brand, though, is the most important part, does it worry you at all to have people using the brand and using the name when you can't control it?
We do control it in that we have a brand company, we have a fantastic brand team, and there are very strict rules. But most of the companies we have reasonably big stakes in. But if we do sell it, the brand generally lives on, and we can still monitor it.
I don't think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that this is in the book, but what is the origin story of the Virgin brand itself? Meaning, when you decided to...
That was in the previous book.
Yeah, I think that was in the previous book.
I was 16 years old. I was sitting around with a bunch of girls
here we go.
Drinking.
This is the story.
Drinking
it's
wine.
Not going where I think it's
and I'd come up with the name Slip Disc Records for our new record company, because based on the old black vinyl needle keeping slipping. And one of the girls said, "No, call it Virgin. We're all virgins. We're all virgin. You're virgin in business." And so we decided on Virgin. And then I couldn't get it registered in the registry office for 4 years because they thought the word virgin was rude. And in the end, I wrote a letter to them saying, quoting the English dictionary, it's pure, it's untouched, it's unblemished, it's the opposite of rude, and they finally gave in and let us register it.
But it wasn't a strategic decision that the brand, the word Virgin, could be used in so many different places.
It wasn't at the time. Obviously, we got lucky because, there's almost, perhaps the only company that we came unstuck on was Virgin Brides, because there wasn't a market for them, and we found that the business didn't work. But generally, it works well with pretty well anything you can do. Virgin Condoms also had some issues.
Oh, I'm confused now.
What's that?
Nothing.
Within the various businesses that are branded Virgin,
Virgin Atlantic was a baby that was born 35 years ago. They got bullied in a big way by British Airways. Came out. She grew into a beautiful young lady, and she's still going strong at 35 years old. And I think Virgin Atlantic put Virgin on the map on a global basis. And I've always had a soft spot for Virgin Atlantic.
You write in the book about Virgin America, which has now been sold to Alaska Airlines, and that brand is going to ultimately get folded into Alaska, and how upset it sounds like you must be about that.
Yeah, I explain in the book how disappointed I was. I wasn't allowed to have the voting shares. The American government, because I had an English accent, said you can set up an airline, but you can't have the voting shares. So we had to bring in other shareholders. An offer was made that they decided they couldn't refuse. The sad thing is that Virgin America has been voted best airline in the States 12 years in a row by Condé Nast Traveler, and it's a great airline, and I think people love it, and I think Alaska are very foolish to just absorb it.
Have you had that conversation with them?
Yeah, of course, and they've lost a lot of the staff, and big companies often do this. They make them, they buy something because it's doing so well, and then they castrate it.
Is this an opportunity for you to create a new one?
I think just watch this space on that one. I don't normally take these things lying down. I had a show that was very different from his. It was, Sarah Blakely, actually, from Spanx, was one of the people on the show just when she was starting out. And took her up in a hot air balloon, had a, I was in one hot air balloon, she was in the other. We had a plank between the balloons, and she had to walk across the plank to come and see me. And then we had a rope ladder that both of us had to climb, and she had to have tea on the top of the balloon.
Were you connected to something, I hope?
I mean, Sarah, we definitely connected.
I don't even like hearing
we wouldn't
this.
have wanted to lose her. But it was a fun show, and Trump wrote a letter, I mean, very, very Trumpish. You have to read the book to see that was the tone of the letter, but just disparaging the show and saying, you should concentrate on the airline. The airline business is a terrible business. Don't worry about producing. They don't worry about producing shows. I mean, just typical Trump anyway. But read the book.
Did you ever have a friendship with him?
The only time I'd met him before was equally bizarre. He invited me to lunch or dinner at his house, and he'd just been bankrupt. And I thought we'd have an interesting conversation about a whole range of issues. And he just spent the whole lunch talking about 5 people he'd rung up to try to get help from when he was bankrupt.
What do you mean when he was bankrupt? One of his companies?
One of his companies had just been bankrupt.
Okay.
And how these people had refused to help him, and how his life's mission was going to be to destroy these people. And that literally, that was the gist of this conversation of our very, very first meeting. And I left just thinking, I said to him, look, you're going to eat yourself up. You're going to destroy these people unnecessarily. They haven't actually crossed you. They just said no. But he was fixated on this mission of his.
I think for us, it's really a testament for what we've done over the last 3 years. I mean, 3 years ago, we were sitting in a garage, and now we're moving to a production commercialization phase. And to have a group like Virgin supporting that and actually helping us do that transition means we're doing something right. So I think it's really exciting for us to have a partner that's going to be taking us from, I'll say, post-garage to actually taking people down the tube.
So it's a signal to future potential customers out there, but I guess it's also a big signal to potential investors, too.
Yeah, and I think for us, having that kind of, I'll say, credibility and knowing that we're creating a new mode of transportation, and then we've got people who've actually done that before and created new forms of that experience, I think I can't find a better way to say, if you've got new transportation, let's reinvent the experience and not do the things that we don't like about current travel.
So, Richard, we had you on the other day to talk about this, about where you see this really heading. But what captured you when you sat down with them?
Well, first of all, we invest in people. Josh used to work at Virgin Galactic before, and we were incredibly sad to lose him at Virgin Galactic. And it's his genius that has actually really created Hyperloop One, Virgin Hyperloop One. And I have a train company, I think the largest train company in the UK. The fastest those trains can go is about 130 miles an hour. The idea of being able to transport people at 600-700 miles an hour is just too exciting. So we wanted to do it for our passengers. We wanted to do it for the fact that all over the world that we go, people are saying, they would just love the opportunity of making countries a lot smaller and making city pairs a lot smaller. So it excites us enormously. And I also went out and to the desert, saw it running, and it is ridiculously exciting.
Josh, let's talk about where you are right now, how fast things go, what you plan to get to. Your last test showed what?
It's about 200 miles an hour.
Yeah, just under?
Yeah, and Richard and the Virgin team came out in May and got to walk inside the tube, got to experience the whole thing. And for us, that was right before we actually did the test back in July. And now we're doing the airlock, right? So we're putting that in, which is how you'd actually get the vehicle inside the tube when you're moving in the production environment. So from a station into the tube, that way you're having these pods zip through very quickly. And we're actually testing that within a couple weeks here, and then we'll be going a bit faster as well. So
when do you get up to 600, 700 miles an hour?
we need a little bit more tube for that. We only have about 500 yards of tube, so if we need about 2 to 3 kilometers, about 2 miles worth of tube to get up to those kind of speeds.
Yeah, don't try it yet.
Sport mode.
That would be some
sport mode.
serious G-forces, starting and stopping in 500
Well,
feet.
there's no G-force
In it, right.
if it's straight. I mean, do you want to explain that?
What about accelerating? But during acceleration?
Not much, is there?
Yeah, it's about what you'd feel at an aircraft to take off. And then once
But
you're
at 500 feet at the acceleration you're talking about, you can't get anywhere near 700 miles.
correct.
an hour.
So we're accelerating.
If you could,
yeah.
the acceleration you'd feel, right?
So this is the part that
Okay.
I just if it's a physics thing that I don't understand, which is, let's say you built one of these trains from New York to DC, which would
Okay.
be perfect, selfishly, for
right.
those of us here. But there are people who are going to want to get off in Philly and maybe other places, or is it just? And how can these pods jump off the track and keep? I mean, because how big are the pods?
So they're about 40 to 50 person-sized pods, anywhere on that order. So instead of actually having the vehicles like a whole train, you're able to send think an individual car.
Right.
And then you're only going to Philadelphia. You're only going to Baltimore. You're only going to DC.
But you got pods behind you.
You've got
Gotta get out of the way.
pods behind you, and the fact that we have this maglev, right? Now, maglev has this horrible stigma of being really expensive, outdated, and all this other stuff, but we've got a new version of that.
Okay.
And so what that allows us to do is digital switching. So you're allowed to basically turn, imagine an off-ramp on a highway, as opposed to having this track actually have to move. And so because you can do that, you can have pods follow each other very, very closely.
So, the world runs on data. And what Spaceboat is doing is we're trying to fill the security gaps and cover the security gaps in the terrestrial networks and that exist in the cloud storage infrastructure. So by putting our satellites into space, we're interconnected using optical lasers. It's moving data at a very high speed, and there's no exposure to the ground.
Well, if you can get the data, how come other people can't somehow access it the way you get it?
Yeah, well, that's a good question, but it's at 400 kilometers above the Earth, and it's hard to hack into data at that altitude.
Let's, since we're always time constrained, Nicole, we'll get to your idea. You need more satellites. How big are these things anyway? They're similar, I guess, the same size that you would use for the cube system you're going to set up?
I think the cube system is going to be much smaller. They're on the size of like 10 kilogram.
And you need 100 of them. You need 100 of them.
We're looking at 100 of them.
And you set up a network that could look at look down at the Earth and see an entire area of crops that might be water depleted, or you could look down at a fracking site and see methane leaking, or you could look at the oceans. Could you see the plastic building up somewhere in the ocean? You could see whatever you need to see from space, you could see using this, and then if it's measurable, it's fixable. Is that the idea?
Yeah, absolutely, and that is the idea, is to provide that information. So we're essentially, in the simplest terms, I think of it as measuring the Earth, measuring our planet, and the things that are on it and in it, and which then gives us the information not to just locate it, but to manage it. And from the longer term sustainable, sense of our planet, and from the sense of how do we manage our resources in the most economical way, too.
So how high are these? Low orbit?
Yes, exactly. So they're at low Earth orbit. It's 400 kilometers above the Earth. We're flying above the equatorial plane.
You taking a balloon up there yet? You got about 400 kilometers, didn't you? Did you?
We've done the ballooning nets in the past. Now
How high though? How high? You didn't get 400.
No, I was up to 50,000 feet. But
well, that's stupid anyway. That's just as bad almost. That's crazy.
But what they're both doing is fantastic. I mean, methane leaking. I mean, the damage is something like 20 times worse than carbon. So if she can actually let people know where the methane leaks are taking place, and then stop them. A, it saves the companies money, but B, it saves the environment a lot of damage.
There's a lot of room up there.
And she's also doing lots of wonderful work in the oceans as well. So, and that needs monitoring. I mean, illegal fishing boats, again, something else that can be done.
I mean, you don't need to manage the traffic at any point, right? There's a lot of room, but this is a lot of, we're talking about having a lot of things up there. There's, right?
Yeah, but there are the traffic controllers are in place.
There.
Yeah.
And they're moving, I would imagine, at...
The advantage of low Earth orbit is that every 5 years they actually burn up and fall out. So as new technology comes, you then put new satellites up. But so you're not in danger of cluttering up the space.
It'd be nice to have a company that sends them up there. You need new ones every 5 years.
I mean that's why we've got Virgin Orbital, which we have a contract here. We'll sign a contract.
This sounds like it's going to be expensive, though. Right?
Well, actually, it's a capital-intensive business, but our business model, we're asset light. So our total capex is under $500 million. We're doing 12 satellites. We've got 8 petabytes of data storage in our satellites. 3 terabytes can store the entire Library of Congress. We've got like 3,000 times that capacity. So in terms of our ability to protect data and get it off the ground and move it in a cost-efficient way without the regulatory constraints of other issues. I mean, because our business model is to do something unique and different.
I was going to say, if it's not stored, I mean, there are all these questions about privacy and EU privacy laws and wanting to have servers stored on their own countries. Does this impact any of that? If it's in space, like we're
yeah, that's a great great point, because really what the question comes down to is data sovereignty and protection of data.
Yeah.
And as we talk with our customers are interested about putting data in space, but their lawyers are talking to us about, can this be in compliance with our global data protection laws? And so you take that data and you put it up in space, and you're essentially having this diplomatic immunity, and we looked as ways to be in compliance with data protection. So our business model is really moving data in a secure environment, providing data sovereignty, and also creating a future for communications in space.
What is the difference between the way you're approaching this versus the way Elon Musk is approaching this versus the way Jeff Bezos is approaching this? That's a conversation that we have a lot, but you're now here, and you can tell us yourself.
As a astronaut, I'm sitting opposite. I think space needs a lot of companies doing different things to benefit the Earth back here. I think Elon's absolutely fixated on going to Mars, and that is almost, I think, is his life mission. And it's as wonderful as, you know, Kennedy was fixated on the moon, the moon shot. I think Jeff and ourselves are more interested in, you know, how we can use space to you know, benefit the Earth, because the Earth is, in my opinion, extremely beautiful. And needs to be protected, and we've just learnt on some of the ways that we can protect the Earth by using space. And then the other thing is just, you know, there are thousands of people who would love the opportunity of becoming astronauts and going into space. And Virgin Galactic is the only company that's built a spaceship with wheels that can come back and land again, and take people up and enable them to become astronauts. Obviously, we deal with the space program, and we've had 12 years of developing it. We had the accident 4 years ago, and I talk about how I believe you need to deal with an accident if you're the boss of a company, and obviously how you need to deal with all the 600, 700 engineers, your staff, the public, in order to get through it, and then hopefully move on ahead and put it behind you, and hopefully come out ahead in the long run. And Virgin Galactic, well, Virgin Orbit, which we've just been talking about, we should be in orbit traveling at 18,500 miles an hour in about 4 months' time, and putting satellites around the Earth. Virgin Galactic should be in space in about 4 months' time. So we're coming, VSS Unity, our new spaceship, will be heading the way. So we're very, very close now to coming to the culmination of 12 years hard work, and you could only do that as a private company. I mean, the idea of building a spaceship company as a public company would not have been possible, and because you need to have a lot of belief in your team, and I think that they are about to deliver.
Were there other times along that journey where you thought, "Wow, this I bit off more than I could chew here. This was a much tougher lift than I anticipated"?
I think there's, I mean, there's lots of ups and downs, and we started the companies from scratch, when I was 15 years old, and without any financial backing. The advantage of that is that we still own 100% of the top companies, so I can make bolder decisions than if I'd had other shareholders in that top company. But when you start from scratch without financial backing, there's a very thin dividing line between success and failure, and we just stayed the right side.
I mean Virgin Galactic in particular. Was there ever a point along that journey that you thought?
I think, when the accident happened, if it had been a technical problem and not pilot error, we would have had to ask some big questions. Very quickly, we found out that the test pilot had made a mistake, and in a sense, that's what test pilots are there to discover. They're very brave. They go up, they they test craft that you can't test on the ground in the air, and obviously a mistake at 3,500 miles an hour is fatal. So obviously that mistake will not be made again. So that was really the main, the main ghastly day, that we faced. I've been motivated by creating products that make a real difference in the world and in people's lives.
But you can't keep doing it if
no. But the end result of that is that if you create something exceptional, it actually ends up becoming very valuable. I mean, like, Elon Musk's space company is now raising money at $20 billion. Our space company, is worth a number of billions of dollars, and one or two other.
But when you started that company,
yeah,
did you put together? Was there a business plan that said,
no,
we're going to do this, and this is what the revenues are going to look like? No.
No. I mean, no. And I don't think I've ever done a business plan for any of our companies, because you can go to one set of accountants, they'll tell you why you're going to make money, another one going to tell you how you're going to lose money. You've just got to create the best airline, or the best train company, or the best health clubs, or the best mobile phone company. And then if it is the best, then at the end of the year, more money will come in than goes out.
Who do you surround yourself with? No, I ask because we know you and we know the brand, but I imagine that there is a team behind this, and I imagine a team of advisors and people that you talk to about whether you should be doing X, Y, or Z.
I have a wonderful chairman, Peter Norris, and a wonderful managing director, Josh Bailey. So they should sit in this chair next time, and you'll see the other side of the people who are doing the real hard work out in the front. But yeah, we've got 80,000 employees. There's a lot of work that goes on that I fortunately don't have to deal with.
Are they like-minded in terms of who you are, or are they kind of grounding, providing the opposite?
They're like-minded, but I mean, I'm Dr. Yes, and yeah, they sometimes give me a reason why maybe I'm just getting a bit too enthusiastic on occasions. Ultimately, though, the buck stops with me, and sometimes I will just say, well, screw it, let's do it. We're going I don't care about what the figures say. We'll prove them wrong.
That's great. I read something that you had written this week, and I bring it up because I know it's been an issue with several people in our church who have run into scams too. You had a very sophisticated scam artist who came after you. You figured it out, but you had a friend who wasn't as lucky.
Yeah, I mean, I had a call from Sir Michael Fallon, who was the Defence Secretary in the UK, saying that a high-level British diplomat had been kidnapped, and the government weren't allowed to put up money for blackmail and for extortion. And he was coming to a number of businessmen to put up $5 million each to get the person back out again. And fortunately, I mean, it was very real. I mean, but I double-checked and found that Sir Michael Fallon hadn't phoned me.
But it sounded like him when he called.
It absolutely sounded like him. And he had official notepaper, letters to my secretary, and so on.
It's much more sophisticated than the Nigerian emails I get.
Yeah. And then when we had this hurricane in Necker Island, somebody sounding like myself rang up a friend of mine in the States, a very high-profile, really good man, businessman, and said that Richard couldn't get hold of his office in England, and and I just needed $2 million to help the local population for rebuilding the Caribbean, and he paid it, and that's the end of he's lost that $2 million, and now that's a heist of. Bank. If a bank robber got $2 million, they'd be very happy. I mean, and this is happening all the time. But worse, it's happening to people for $1,000 here, $500 there, $2,000 there, who can't afford it. I mean, this businessman can afford to lose $2 million, so I think the police need to put their attention on this much more than. The war on drugs has been failed for 60 years. They should regulate and decriminalize drugs and help people with the drug problem, and put all those people that are dealing with drugs. They should concentrate on all the vulnerable people that are being hurt in this way, I think.
Let's talk a little bit about Necker Island and the Caribbean after the hurricane. You wrote it out. What's the situation right now in terms of what may be needed?
Well, look, big chunks of the Caribbean have been completely and utterly devastated. I mean, it was a Category 7 hurricane that hit us over 200 miles an hour, and you know, we're working with the World Bank, we're working with the IMF, and various other, the International Development Bank, to try to, you know, to try to get the Caribbean rebuilt, and to try to get it rebuilt with clean energy rather than dirty energy, so that when something like this happens, that the whole grid won't, you know, not everybody won't be knocked off for 9 months, but it's going to be tough for a lot of, again, quite vulnerable people who lived in, you know, wooden houses, who've lost everything.
So, Richard, we want to thank you so much for your time today. And folks, again, the book is called Finding My Virginity. We really appreciate your time today.
Thank you very much.
Hey there, thanks for checking out CNBC on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all of the day's biggest stories. You can also click on any of the videos around me to watch the latest from CNBC. Thanks for watching.